Hello and welcome back to OT the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. I'm Andy Green.
And as always, I am Phil Schultz.
Felix, good to have you here today. Glad you could make it.
Yes, I must admit, eager listeners for my dulcet voice will be disappointed in the coming segment of this podcast because I had to call in sick. So
Ricky's going to be shattered.
Yeah, I had to leave Andy out on his own, like a little chick pushed out of the nest.
No training wheels this week for me.
Yeah, well, we were mixing our metaphors of like I was a little bird pushing you out of the nest, and you were a training. Do birds have training wheels? I don't think they do. Learn to fly.
Sorry, I'm just so used to doing this show on my own now.
The question is, will I have a job by the end of the episode?
I'm not entirely sure how to fire you. We also don't have sick leave.
The complex, multi-layered corporate structure of OT the podcast. We'll have to the shell companies. They'll have to be. I don't know. There's something going on.
The lawyers will sort it out. Anyway, so what you missed, which is the hefty chunk of this,
a corker.
It's a big boy. But we had a chat with American actor Miles Fisher. So he is a entrepreneur. He's got a coffee bean company called Bixby. You might have seen a release with Matt Hranak recently, very recently, in fact.
Yeah, bud.
He's been in dozens of movies and TV. He's sort of famous for doing a really, really solid Tom Cruise impersonation, which we absolutely have to link up.
Do we get him doing Tom in the episode? Does he do a little?
I'm not going to spoil it for you,
okay.
Or the listeners.
Okay. Little cameo from Mr. Cruise.
he does a Felix impersonation.
Oh,
so
gee.
If I do decide to fire you, I've got a man to replace you with, because he actually has a podcast.
Me.
He's got a podcast on the Blammo Network,
cool.
run by Jeremy Kirkland. So he is many fingers, many pies. He is an absolute gent, and we talk about sort of all those topics that I just covered off. We also talk about watches, of course, because he's a massive watch enthusiast.
Yeah.
He's really, really interesting to talk to, and I can't wait for you to kind of actually hear it for the first time.
Yeah, that is legit. We've got some other news as well, though, Andy. Some other big news.
Very big news, massive news.
Yeah, so we have a brand new sponsor. Have you ever heard of a small little company called eBay?
eBay. It rings a bell, Felix.
Online marketplace?
Like the biggest one in the world?
I believe so. So,
massive.
Yeah, so we're pretty happy about that. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to have a chat about a service that they offer in the US called Buy Authentic. So stay tuned for that. And, thanks to eBay for helping make this happen. But while we've, I don't know, maybe it's just that I've been thinking about, sort of buying stuff online and all that. But I saw a story the other day that sort of I thought the listeners of OT might appreciate, because it covers off space and bargains.
Tell me more.
Well, do you remember the Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield?
Yes, the Canadian astronaut.
Yeah, he sort of he broke to fame by doing a cover of David Bowie's Ground Control to Major Tom. In the space station. He had his guitar, it was floating, it was pretty cool. He's also a lovely guy, by all accounts. Well, someone found his flight suit in an op shop or a charity shop or a thrift shop. I don't know what they call it where you are, but here they call it an op shop.
Was it Macklemore?
It might have been. I don't know. That wasn't covered in the Smithsonian article. And I don't know how it got there, but which is kind of wild. Like, it was a genuine suit of his, like those sort of like coveralls they wear. It wasn't one he wore to space, but it was one he used for like promotional tours and photography and stuff.
Still, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that got me thinking, have you ever found anything cool in an op shop?
Never, but I do have a good story about a mate of mine who has a far better story. I'm not entirely sure if it's an op shop or if it's one of those sort of small country stores, but he was sort of 3 hours out of Victoria. I think it's about 9 years ago now. And there was sort of a glass cabinet, a couple of watches underneath, and like most watch enthusiasts do, they have a little bit of a poke around and, you kind of have a closer look if it looks, legit or of interest. And what he managed to wrangle was a vintage Tudor Submariner, the Lollipop. So would be the mid 1970s for the lollipop. I think they
Yeah,
were
cool.
asking like 850, $800, and he
Mhm,
paid
mhm.
like half that. That watch today now is, and this is an absolute like minter, like bracelet. The
Really?
case is untouched. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It'd be like 8 or 9 grand. Like, but I haven't seen a lollipop that nice. So he scored
He
majorly on
scored.
that.
My question is, well, not a question. I would hope if it was me that found that, I would make a maybe not a I would make a decent donation to the charity that op shop was supporting. I've had you know what, Andy, I've also found a Rolex in an op shop.
Okay. Have you?
Steel.
Steel? Wow, hot.
Hmm.
Can be.
It was a Rolex teaspoon.
Oh, you were just staring me.
Yeah, it was one of their little Buchera, double signed steel Rolex.
Oh, whoa. That's going to end up on a collected man, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty fairly common actually. But it's cool.
Amazing.
It's in my drawer. It's impractically small.
Oh, well, I'll drink to that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever. It's the last teaspoon that is used.
The fancy teaspoons.
No, just the one of all the rest are dirty. You're like, oh, I guess I'll use this one.
Like a peasant. All right.
Well, now we've got to have some chats about eBay.
All right. Let's do it.
So, Andy, before we get you chatting to Miles, we're going to talk about this week's brand new sponsor, eBay.
Love it. It is. It's awesome to partner with eBay, such a big and well-known online marketplace,
Hmm,
but
hmm, hmm.
just a fantastic partner to have. And Felix, it's great for us because it means we can make more content. It means we can put more into OT the podcast.
Yep.
And boy, oh boy, have we been.
Oof.
Guys, expect double drops
Double
throughout
drops.
September. I think we're
Absolutely.
doing seven or eight episodes at last count through September and a whole bunch in October. We
Got,
have some amazing guests coming up that
yeah,
we've
some really
recorded.
good ones.
Huge names. I don't. Well, can we drop them, Felix? Can I drop some names, or should we hold it out?
One of them rhymes with tuna.
One of them rhymes with tuna. One of them rhymes with Schmamford. Schmack Schmadger as well. We've got some great
Uh,
guys coming up,
but we'll
and
get to that. We'll get to that, Andy. I think
we'll get to that.
what we want to do is we want to talk about eBay. We want to talk about a
Yes,
service that they've launched in the US called Authenticity Guarantee. Essentially, it's a safer. I think it's a more convenient way to buy watches. So you go
yep,
to eBay, you browse their listings with the Authenticity Guarantee badge, and then you buy one. You've bought it off the
boom,
seller. Seller doesn't ship it to you. Seller ships it to a third party authenticator. And when this guy gets it, guy or girl, leading industry people, they will confirm that the item matches the listing. So the item, the
mm-hmm.
description, the collateral, the box, the papers, all that jazz is all on the same page.
Kosher,
They will also perform a multi point physical authentication inspection. So your watch is also legit. Like they're saying, yep, this is the real deal. They will attach a security tag to it. They will send it with a unique authentication card. And then the authenticator ships it using 2-day signature required shipping to the buyer.
magic. So the eligible watches for the Authenticity Guarantee
Mm.
program, wristwatches that are listed for over $2,000 or expected to sell for over $2,000 US, obviously.
Yep.
Some popular brands and models are automatically included. So
Hmm.
smartwatches, parts, accessories are not, and nor are customized watches.
And this is something that the buyer doesn't pay anything extra for. So eBay picks up the tab on the authentication as well as the shipping from the authenticator to the buyer.
And nor does the seller, Felix. eBay picks up the tab on the whole thing.
As we said at the top, it's important to note that this is US only at the moment, but eBay, is a pretty big company. I don't think
Mm.
it's something that we can, if it goes well, we can expect to see it expand into global markets.
It'd be great to sort of see it, definitely down under. But
Yep.
head to ebay.com/luxury watches to check out their great range of watches, and head to ebay.com/buyauthentic to learn more about this. Felix, have you bought and sold on eBay?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, not too much recently, but like I did a lot of buying sort of when I was learning about watches. So it was for me, it was an important part of working out what was a good watch. And I bought some odd stuff. I got a cool Accutron Deep Sea, dual crown that I was really happy with for a while. Got a cool Pogue for under $100.
Yeah,
Uh,
nice.
I spent a lot more than that getting it serviced, but that's part of the fun. Also, once bought watch from Canada that took me at least 6 months to get here. Andy, what about you? Have you done any buying, selling, that sort of jazz?
For me, I've mainly not watches, but I've mainly used it to kind of research watches, keep an eye on the market. I have, thrown my hat in a ring on plenty of auctions and sadly missed out.
Yeah.
One very memorable watch that I remember looking at. We were
Mm.
together actually. This was Basel World, I think 2017 or 18.
Yeah, I can't remember the year.
Link the details up,
Yeah.
but there was a Tudor, vintage Tudor Submariner that was sort of really, really nice old condition that
Yeah.
ended up selling while we were at Baselworld for, I think, 99,000 US dollars, which was, I think, the most a
I
Tudor
think it was
had
the
ever
most
sold for
most expensive Tudor sub.
public
Yeah.
sale.
Yeah, cool.
Yes, which then kind of went on to have a pretty cool life of its own. But we'll link that up, Felix.
There was yeah, there's some yeah, there are some great stories I think that come off eBay of like those exciting,
100%.
something just blows up, out of nowhere.
It's been a few years since I guess either of us have really played in the eBay space, Felix. But I guess this will change hopefully with the new service.
Yeah, sure. I think the big thing for me, buying and selling on eBay is it's that old chestnut of caveat emptor. So you gotta do your legwork and your diligence. There's
Know
some
your stuff.
yeah. I mean, you've got to know your stuff, and it's not just like about the watches, but you've also got to be across shipping and customs and currency exchange. It can be a bit of uh, a process to get all that. It's not as simple as hitting buy it now and getting a watch to your door until this authenticity guarantee.
Yeah. And I think it's probably whilst we're on the topic of buying things online and eBay as a sponsor, we should probably talk about a few tips for, that online process. Do you have a sort of number one tip?
Look, it's a chestnut, but by the seller.
Yeah, 100%. What
So,
does
I
that
mean,
mean?
well, there's a few things. So, one, it's you buy someone's reputation, and that can be as,
Hmm.
as simple as their sort of eBay, feedback history. You can also be doing a bit of your own independent research, like are they a bricks and mortar store, or do they maybe sell on the forums? Google search their name. Check the forums as of other people, in the watch collecting world had experiences of them, good or bad. But even if it's just maybe a one-off random auction from someone that's not a professional dealer, I think it's still worth sending some messages and saying, "Hey, I'm really interested in this. Can you send me some pictures?" Or just doing that sort of getting a feel of them and their communication. And I think you sort of know, like when you chat to someone, if you get any sort of vibes from them, and if you don't feel comfortable spending the money or chatting to them, just another watch will come up. There's other something else will
Yeah,
be out there. So don't take the risk. I
force
don't
it.
think. Yeah. What about you,
Yeah,
Andy? What do
agree.
you reckon?
Agree. It's got to feel right, and it's got to be right. The sellers, I mean, that's also my golden rule.
Mm,
Because if anything ever did go wrong, at least you've got the seller to fall
yeah,
back on,
yeah. I mean,
which is nice.
trust. It's got to be about trust. You know
Oh,
what?
100%.
You know what else I sort of fall back on after that buying the seller?
What's that?
You got to buy the best you can, Andy Green. The best you
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
I've
That's shopping in general.
yeah, I think, and that took me something a while to learn. Like it's that
Mm,
the thrill of the bargain, or like that maybe one in a million, deal of a lifetime situation. It's really appealing, but often that it won't happen. Like you'll just end up with something that you'll be maybe disappointed with, or it isn't a watch you wanted in the first place, so you won't be happy with it. So I think it's better to hold your fire and go when it's the top of the tree is within your budget.
and that's when it comes back to that sort of buying the seller,
Mm,
and that's why for a lot of this stuff, there are you want it. You might pay more for a reputable, really high tier, top tier reputable seller, but
it's
you
worth it.
can sleep easy. It's so worth it, and the
Yeah.
difference between uh, something that might be 20% less expensive than the top tier guy is going to be much more than 20% worse. So I always, fall back on that.
Mm,
The other thing worth noticing is that Eric Wind a long time ago now, probably a couple of years ago, wrote a pretty thorough write up for Hodinkee.
mm,
We'll link that up. We don't need to go through it all, but he's, given a really, really good rundown of
yeah.
buying online.
The man
What I
knows what
like
he's on
about
about.
yeah, and obviously all of this stuff for our US listeners is kind of put to rest by
Yeah.
by the authenticity guarantee service. Like, if you think about the questions and the topics we've just talked about,
Mm,
they do make this does make the process a lot simpler.
yeah, 100%.
Buyers, sellers, both sides of the transaction, immediately, like, a lot of the risk goes away. So if you
Yeah,
have someone verifying, not only is the watch authentic, which often you have to pay for, mind you, but also verify the contents,
yeah. And
everyone's happy with that.
I think it's not also it's not even a case of maybe the authenticity in question is there's some sort of deception being involved, but maybe it just takes it off the board entirely. Like it could
Yeah.
be completely above board from the reputable seller, but even stuff happens. So if it's been endorsed by a third party, you just don't have to stress about it. Which we've all heard stories where that hasn't happened.
Yeah, and the insurance factor as well, sort of
Yeah,
having it authenticated along the way, and kind of having that little pit stop for the timepiece just adds sort of another layer of, I guess, yeah,
legitimacy.
com- legitimacy to
Yeah.
the whole transaction. So, look, really exciting to sort of see this happen in the US, and I think for the industry as well, this is a really good thing. And I think other platforms will take note.
Who's it for, Andy? Who will benefit from this service?
I mean, having a look at the watches on there currently, which it's quite a fun process to go through, but I think it's for someone who wants to buy a watch online, which everyone is doing
Yeah, it's
now,
convenient.
and doesn't really want to do all of the, like, legwork and hard work that we've just talked about, like doing a background check on your seller
Yeah, I
effectively,
mean,
working out how to pay them specifically, you know, negotiating all the selling stuff with the shipping stuff with them. Sorry, like, it's
it's
just someone who
stressful. Like
sees
for a
something.
high value item, it's it can be
It can be
yeah.
100%. So I think it's just someone who wants to buy a cool luxury watch as if
Mm.
they would anything else, sort of online, and just sort of transact, in a low risk and convenient environment.
Yeah, sure. And like we said, US only at the moment, but hopefully that
Hmm.
goes global or other parts of the globe at least. So head to ebay.com/buy authentic to learn more about authenticity guarantee.
All right, Felix, it's
Yes,
time to call Miles.
let's do it.
Well, I'll do it. So today's guest is an actor, he's a model, he's a comedian, he's a singer, he's an entrepreneur, he's a podcast host, and I'm out of breath. So today we have Miles Fisher joining OT the podcast. Miles, how are you? Where have we found you?
I'm here. I'm here in Los Angeles, here in the heart of Los Angeles. I'm actually at our coffee roasting facility today, um, but it is a hot August day here in California.
Amazing. So we'll get to the coffee in a minute. This is a watch podcast, and I think we've got a lot of ground. Oh, see what I did there? Grounds to cover with you. I think we want to talk to you about some watches because I know you're into it. We've got to talk about coffee as I sip my second cup for the morning. We've got to talk about your podcast that you've recently launched over at Jeremy Kirkland's network, Blammo. And then I think we need to talk about your knack for going viral on YouTube and some pretty good accents. So why don't we kick things off
Okay, and
with,
then I'll only add, then we also you got to give me just a minute to ask you about your experience
for
in
sure.
the OT podcast because I think you guys have done a superb job. I've listened to every episode, and yeah, I'd love to just hear how this kind of new chapter has shaped your life.
No,
So
amazing.
let's
We're happy to
yeah.
share. And as the listeners will notice, Felix is unable to join us today, but Miles can do a pretty mean Australian accent, so we might have to just
I
replace.
don't know. I don't know why. A lot of my mates at university, I went to school with a bunch of Aussies, but they say it's absolutely outrageous, total happenstance. But they say it's actually more Kiwi. I don't know, but apparently it's quite decent.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, done. You're hired. Felix, I'm sorry. This is your official notice. All right, Miles. So you mentioned that you're a fan of the show, which we love. What draws you to watches? What's your passion for watches like? You're probably the one of the more watch enthusiast centric guests that we've had on. I'd love to hear sort of where they fit into your life.
I've I've worn watches for most of my life. But I really only kind of became a nut
Hmm.
recently, honestly. In fact, kind of early on into the pandemic. To be perfectly honest, as just kind of a way to quiet the mind. I
Interesting.
had, you know, kind of around April for us here
Hmm.
in California, at least, it was, well, I mean, it's so global. And I think Australia's calendar on shelter in place is very close to the United States. I mean, it was just chaos. And
Hmm.
it still continues to, but the whole warping of every day just felt like one long run on sentence. And there were, uh, there was a lot of, protests
Yep.
and some rioting. Some of the rioting was actually close to where we lived. I'd spent the last 3 years pouring every bit of myself with my partner into this business, this coffee roasting business, and we
Hmm.
have two young kids, two little girls that are under 3 years old, and I, I just couldn't sleep. What to make of the world. And somebody had given me a book by Nicholas Fowkes, actually, on kind
Oh yeah.
of thinking about time. And I cracked it open one night and I read for 20 minutes and I slept like a baby. And the next day I
Oh.
woke up and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. Why did so actually I'm a big podcast guy. Um,
Hmm.
I just find that, well, talking to another watch guy, I mean, it's a little overused to say, but really time is the only finite resource in life.
Yep.
There's only 24 hours in a day. And one of the special things about podcasts for me is that they unlock a 25th, a 26th hour because you listen to
Mm.
them while you're doing other things, exercising, folding the laundry, on your drive, etc. And so I looked up on podcasts Nick Fowkes, and I came across a podcast. I think the Watches of Switzerland did with like Brian Duffy, their
Okay.
CEO, did a series of interviews, but like long form fireside chats on the history of brands. And so Fowkes was talking about Omega. And then another episode was James Dowling talking about Rolex.
Oh
And
yeah.
they started talking about, as you well know, um, watches as far as what it was like from an entrepreneurial sense to create these brands. Imagine yourself in the late 1800s and, that parts of Switzerland were kind of like Silicon Valley. You had great tax incentives, you had hydropower,
Mm.
that Hans Wilsdorf wasn't even a watchmaker. He was just a marketer. He was a merchant, as they'd say. And he started working with the biggest influencers of his age, a woman who
Yeah.
swam the channel and, people that climbed and summited mountains. And it just immediately turned on my brain. I thought, this is so cool. And I started going down a rabbit hole, after the little ones were asleep. And
Hmm.
just kind of my daily reprieve, I would listen to podcasts and I would watch all the YouTube content. And I just fell hard into watches. So backing up, when I was really young, the first watch I remember wearing just every single day and loved it was a Timex Ironman.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
and I think like Indiglo was brought to market in like 1992, so that feels right. I mean, I wore that
Yep.
thing every single day for years, and my my father, when I was really young, my father ran for office for the Senate here in the
Hmm.
U.S. This is a long time ago, but and I don't really remember much of it, but I do remember that at one time Bill Clinton, who was president at the time, came to Dallas to co-host an event to support my dad. And the reason I bring that up is because I got to have my photo taken with Mr. President, and he said, "Hey, you're wearing the same watch as me."
Well,
And he
that's
was
pretty
wearing
cool.
a Timex Ironman, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is the coolest!" And so I wore that. That was just my everyday and only watch until high school. And I can't believe now that my parents let me do this, but when I was 16 years old,
Uh-huh.
I spent half a year on kind of a very rugged, almost like in America we call it kind of outward bounds type program. This was on an island in the Bahamas. Trust me,
Sounds
it was
horrible.
not luxurious, but it was run by a former Navy SEAL, and it was 30 kind of, high achieving students from across the country were chosen for this
Mhm.
pilot program. There was no running water, no electricity. We started every day at 6 a.m. running a mile and a half. This is no exaggeration. And
Wow.
the kind of benefit of it, it was all centered around marine biology and scuba diving. So every day we would scuba dive. And so the rule was, when you got accepted in the program, you had to bring a dive watch that was 10 plus ATM.
Okay.
And so I got, it was the Luminox Navy SEAL, just the traditional classic Luminox watch, which
Yeah,
really
perfect.
performed for me. And we did like night dives and stuff. And I, I mean, that was just the coolest watch ever. And then that was kind of it. I mean, I had a few watches in my life. I've always appreciated watches, but when I went to college, two things happened. One,
Mhm.
I I lost a bet with my roommate kind of very early in freshman year, and my end of the bet, kind of my punishment for losing the bet, is I had to try out for like the fancy a cappella group on campus,
Okay.
which is a really nerdy thing. There's a hit show called Glee, which came
Yeah, I've
on,
heard.
which kind of gave a rebirth. This was well before Glee. I mean, this was, it was properly nerdy, and it was kind of black tie jazz, and
Uh-huh.
we sang songs from the 1920s and 1940s. But the the secret was, every summer this group went on a 25 country, 6 continent world tour, and it's only 12 guys.
Okay.
And I somehow made this group, and we traveled. We traveled all over the world. And so at the same time, I was working at a kind of a men's clothing shop just on the side while I was a student, and
Mhm.
got really into like men's tailoring, and it was this old school haberdashery. So I appreciated watches, but I became more fluent in, I guess, like menswear and
Mhm.
the tailoring tradition. And so, in my 20s, if I ever had a little bit of money to spend, I would always spend that towards, clothing or something bespoke, because I've been so lucky to meet tailors around the world.
Mhm.
And then when I got married, giving you a bit of an abbreviated version, but
I feel
when I
like I'm
got
listening to
married,
the plot of like American Pie 2 just quietly. That joins the a cappella group, has this worldwide band camp tour.
okay, well, we should. I know I've already lost it, because, as I recall, American Pie 2 was
Yeah.
very, very inferior to the originals. So I should probably wrap it up.
I
But
drive a Ford Bronco.
yeah, exactly. Uh, thank goodness there are no visuals associated with the podcast.
Mm.
No, my wife gave me a beautiful tank, a Cartier tank,
Oh,
with an
lovely.
engraving, the about an hour before we got married. And like my best man like gave it to me right as you're kind of at the back of the church, and he just said, "Hey, this is from Lucy." And I opened it up, and the engraving on the back also matched a little engraving she did on the inside of just my wedding ring, the wedding band.
Oh, beautiful.
I mean, that's a magic watch for me. And so I had that,
Mhm.
but it was, it's a special watch, and I didn't feel comfortable kind of wearing it every
Mhm.
day for obvious reasons. And so when we got married, also, we had a very large wedding. If we did it all over again, I don't think we would have had so many people. But I have many siblings, and I'm the last in my
Yep.
family to get married, and it's very much about what the parents want, etc. And
Sure, 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 sure.
these a lot of the guests were very gracious to give to a registry. Uh,
Okay.
and the truth is, when I don't know about you, Andy, I'm 37 years old. I got married when I was 30,
Okay.
and my wife's only a few years younger. But you're young, and like, you just don't need stuff in the same way
Yep.
that generations before us did. And I like nice things, and I even like nice china and stuff. Like, we don't
Yep.
need any of that at all.
Yeah, not
And
really.
so and particularly like heavy wooden furniture or anything silver that needs to be. It's so intense. And so I remember we'd been married 6 months, and we were at this store that people had given the registry to, and I was saying this to my wife. I don't know if we need this, and the lovely clerk was like, "Oh, well, you should just transfer it to credit and buy a watch." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And
Yes.
I was like, "What? What? You can do that?" And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. It just all transfers to a credit." So, and
Amazing.
like, everything kind of went slow mo. And I looked at, and there's one watch that I'd eyed for a long time as like the ultimate, just kind of like fairly discreet, but your
Yep.
everyday great watch, which is the Explorer, the
Yeah, perfect.
214270. And
Yeah,
they
nice.
had one, and I asked Lucy, I was like, is this the right thing to do? Is this okay? Are you okay with this? And she was like, yeah, it's just consider it like a wedding present, like the other one. So it was a 2 watch collection, an Explorer and a Tank that I had, I wore Explorer
Solid.
every day, and the days that I didn't, it was just the Tank, and it's perfect until the pandemic. and everything kind of changed when I went deep down into this wormhole in the most wonderful way. And yeah, we can talk about that, but just the explosion of content, it's so crazy that
Yep.
like you couldn't go outside, and
Mhm.
the universe felt so vague and out of touch that to go inwards into the small little universe of watches, and then the community built around watches and the conversations and this new paradigm of content creators, it is it's as good as it gets for me as far as binging on content. And you and Felix, what you're doing, and also, I mean, just quick shout out to, like, frankly, guys all around the world. I mean, like, I don't
Yeah,
know if I can, but like
sure.
your buddy
Yeah,
Adrian from Bark and Jack, like ID guy from South Africa, even Jenny L
yeah.
from Germany. I have no idea who she is, but she seems so like sweet and amazing. And like Mark Cho in Hong Kong, Tim
Mhm.
Mosso is one of the most extraordinary gifted, like, natural athletes I've ever seen in my life. I don't know how a guy like that does it. And hell, even Archie Luxury. I mean, there's so many unbelievable characters in this world. It's just fun.
Yeah, we've got Jenny coming up in a couple of weeks, so she's lovely. She's really talented.
She's really, really great. And, I mean, the girls from 10 and 2, you
Yep.
guys introduced me to them, and um, all of it. I mean, even the Scottish watch guys, what characters those guys are.
There's a lot of personality kicking around. It's great.
uh,
So
you you very much seem to be a bit of kind of all crossroads lead through Andy and Felix at the moment, which is so nice.
Oh, well, thank you. We're glad to hear that. We've worked together for a long time, and you might not know that about us, but that might explain the dynamic and sort of where we fit in the industry. And being here in Australia, it's sort of we're so isolated and disconnected from everything. We sort of are working at 4 or 5 times speed to bring everything together, and get different guests from around the world and different time zones, and pretty frequently recording at 6 or 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning. But we've got some exciting things coming up. Just to plug our own show.
Please.
You mentioned the pandemic hit. Have you made any pandemic purchases?
I have. I
Where have
have.
you got?
So and actually I'm rocking it right now.
Oh,
What wrist check, by the way? What are you working right now this
so
early
I'm
in the
working.
morning?
Well, I always wear a watch even at home, but I'm wearing a 1983 Rolex Sea Dweller 666, so the 16660 matte dial.
Fan
Yeah,
fan me. I'm perspirating already just hearing that. That is a lovely piece.
yeah. What about yourself?
I've got this Grand Seiko, the SBGY 003. Um,
SBG0Y. What was it?
SBGY
Yep.
003.
Google it.
So
I do not know my Seiko ref. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's
Very
gorgeous.
nice.
It was a limited. I think it was introduced 3 years ago, which was like the occasion was the 20th anniversary of the Spring Drive.
Yep.
Um, but it is just immaculate. It's very, very clean. When I was very young, when I was 5 years old, my family moved to Japan for a little over a year,
Hmm.
and my earliest memories are of living in Tokyo, and my whole life have always just kind of been enamored by so much of just kind of frankly, the Japanese ethos
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of things. And I mean, Grand Seiko is amazing, but I was never too crazy about just the power reserve being on the dial
On
on
the
the
dial.
front.
Yeah, yeah.
And this one's got a clear case back. It's also a bit of a smaller format. I think it's like 38.5 millimeters, but it's discreet. I like it. And then it's a good one to actually swatch out straps on, I
Yeah,
found.
yeah, yeah. What have you got it on now?
Um,
It's because it comes on like a black alligator strap, maybe.
comes on black alligator, which I'm not as keen on. I've got
Hmm.
it on actually a strap I bought from the Armory in Hong Kong.
Yeah, nice.
Shout out Mark Cho, but it's a piece that they did with drakes, where
Yep.
it's made out of an old vintage drake tie, the silk, and then they sent it to Jean Rousseau in
Yeah, okay.
Paris. So it's cool. It feels, um, I don't know. It just makes my heart sing, to be honest.
Love the choice of the Grand Seiko. Is there anything else that you've sort of been nerding out on or researching into a lot that you want to kind of purchase?
I'm someone who believes you buy a watch, you should wear it regularly. Um,
Yep.
and so the one other thing that's kind of my two hobbies, one is watches and the other is
Hmm.
golf. I love golf, and um, blessedly, it's actually something, an activity you can still do in this COVID era. That's
Yeah.
still safe and be out and about. So I don't get as much time as I'd like to play, but I thought, okay, let's think about like what some golf watch options are. Um, and so in doing a bit of research, one, I found, did you know that there is a Cartier Pasha made specifically for
Mm.
golfers?
I did not.
It
Tell me
is
about it.
far out. And I think either Gerald Genta designed it himself or he kind of co-signed on it. I mean, it is an outrageous piece. And it's a full-on Pasha, but then there's also kind of four different rotational dials. So if you were to play a match with three other people, so just foursomes, it allows you to
Hmm.
keep the score, but it's heavy. It's crazy. The idea that anybody would actually like play wearing this is outrageous. But I was like, okay, all right. So there are, because truthfully, an activity like golf, there are great watches out there, and they're smart watches. Like
Yeah.
Garmin makes an extraordinary product that actually tells you the yardage directly to the hole. It's got every course in the world pre-programmed. So obviously that's what one should wear. But I thought, okay, well, the only function I necessarily need is just to help me keep score, and just to keep score relative to par. But you can, the way I usually play, you probably have a bunch of bogeys, but if you make a birdie, it takes one back. So I thought if I just had a bezel that was bi-rotational, I could
Hmm.
move that. And I thought I don't want it to move on the outside. So kind of an interior bi-rotational bezel. So I started looking at like JLC Memovoxes,
Yep.
just, and they relaunched their Polaris sports watch. And I just started getting in my head like, boy, that would be a nice golf watch. And they've been marketing towards quote unquote the man in movement. They're really kind
Hmm.
of like playing it up, and I thought, boy, that's a pretty good looking piece. And so that's my golf watch, and it's now kind of like my everyday sports watch. It's great. But yeah, these two pieces that I've got during the pandemic, and actually I was kind of given license to buy one because of something that happened in your part of the world, which is
Okay.
I made about a year ago. I made this fun little video where it's kind of like me as Tom Cruise running for president. Uh,
It's an amazing video, and you're actually running. This is on my list of things to talk to you about.
well,
So
I'll tell you all about it, but I'll kind of cut to
yeah.
the end quickly, which is we put it out in the world, and it was
Uh huh.
great, and it got millions of views, and it was a lot of fun. And that was about a year ago. And so several months ago, I got an incoming email out of the blue from Foxtel in Australia.
Uh huh.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I gather Foxtel is kind of the cable company, right?
Yep.
Um,
The one.
so they were like, "Hey, we love your Tom Cruise thing. We have licensed a bunch of Tom Cruise movies from his library for our kind of summer of Tom Cruise blockbusters. Can we use your little video as an ad to run kind of across the country?" I
Amazing.
was like, "Sure, absolutely." But I'm going to need to be compensated, and it was kind of this once in a lifetime out of the blue moment where all of a sudden I got this check, and I
Yeah.
was deep into a new obsession, a resurgence obsession in watches, and I've been thinking about it a lot. So because of that, yeah, I was able to get these two pieces, and it's been a lot of fun. I don't know. You're the first person I've
Amazing.
spoken to down under. Have you seen a commercial with the Tom Cruise lookalike running around?
I've seen I've seen the video a couple of times, but I'll have to have a look through Foxtel later because I have it. but that is an amazing story. I just love that you did the responsible thing to do. That's so cool. And the video itself, right? So we have to link this up because your Tom Cruise impersonation it's pretty bang on. The laugh, I mean, with the glasses on, it's ridiculous. And I think we'll post a link, and we might even have to grab the video file off you to post it. But for the people that haven't seen it yet, you're sort of running through the desert, and it's a single continuous like footage shot, and you're running at like a pretty strong pace. 2 minutes with this super detailed script, of all the great features you'll bring to office, like being an ER doctor and a pilot, and basically all the movies Tom Cruise has done.
It's so
And
outrageous. Basically, it's been a blessing and a curse that for much of my life, I mean, virtually every single day, somebody comes up and says, "Hey, has anybody ever told you you look like Tom Cruise?" And for them, it's very exciting. For me, after a while, but it has nothing to do with me. It's just this kind of thing. But the truth is like I can also, imitate really well, and that's always kind of been, a talent that I've had since I was young is imitations of people. And so,
well, you played Tom Cruise, right, in a superhero movie?
I didn't even mean to. I was called back. I'd originally been cast in that film, and the director said, "Hey, this is crazy," but this was right at the peak. First off, let me just say, I grew up watching Tom Cruise movies. I was born in 1983. Tom Cruise is the coolest thing in the world, and Top Gun was the coolest movie in the world, and all of that. And so, I will just say that I've always just been a mega fan, and by all accounts, he's like the most professional, nice guy, almost intensely nice. However, there was kind of a crazy time when all the Scientology stuff became very public, and then jumping on the couch with Oprah, and then the video, with him in a black turtleneck that got really, really weird. And when that video came out, that's the same time this movie was going to come out.
I remember.
And so the director was like, "Hey, we just want to make something kind of like topical because it's being released in theaters. Would you be down to like spoof Tom Cruise?" And I said, "Sure, okay." And so we did that, and it was right before YouTube, but they put it online, and it got millions and millions of views. And then they took it down because it was the only reason people were buying the DVDs. That it was like a special feature on the DVDs back when people bought DVDs. But that was, that was 10 years ago, and that kind of started me into this. I never thought I would be an actor for any period of my life, and I kind of stumbled into it, and it was a very fun, colorful ride for many years.
That's so cool. I'd probably just sort of finished high school around the time that movie came out. So it was those types of spoof comedies were basically all I was binge watching as sort of 18, 19-year-old bloke in Melbourne going to uni. So I remember it very well, and we'll link all this up because the video, and it shows some impressive stamina, I must say. Like, I don't know, it's continuous shot. It's really well produced. It's hilarious. The laugh that's what Felix and I were talking about just the other day when we were getting sort of organizing everything. It's just the laugh, and honestly, with the
I came. So I grew up between Dallas, Texas, and Washington, D.C., and came from a political family. And my father, in his life had run for office. My grandfather had run for office, my great-grandfather. And having gone to high school in D.C., all my friends' parents were in politics. So I just grew up kind of fluent in the constant language of politicians, which a lot of times is BS, and a lot of times is, just kind of presenting and all of this sort of thing. And so because people had said, "Oh, you look like Tom Cruise," and I'd heard it just a gazillionth time, I was like, well, what if Tom Cruise like ran for president? Because like, what does Tom Cruise do better than anyone? He runs. Like, he literally runs in every movie, and the man is a machine. Like, he does not age. Like Tom Cruise today from Tom Cruise like 25 years ago. I'll put it to you this way. I think, by now the new Top Gun movie would have come out, but it's going to come out soon, right? And it was a long time ago. Well, Tom Cruise like looks a whole lot younger than all the other original castmates in the original Top Gun. You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
It's wild. But I was like, okay, what if Tom Cruise really ran for president? Like, how would he actually position it? Like, I've got a feeling Tom Cruise would just straight up be like, I am literally every man. And we just kind of started with that and started with this script. And it was really fun, but I really messed up my ankles, Andy, because I ended up running. I was running in the middle of the desert. It really was 100 degrees,
Yeah.
and I really was running. And we got it on. It only took a few takes, but all in shooting I mean, each one was the hardest thing was breathing because you're kind of giving
Yeah.
a soliloquy while you're. I mean, it was a proper sprint, but the worst part is I was wearing lace up leather shoes, like old school, like
Right.
Ferragamo, horrible for you. And I really messed up. I couldn't walk for like 2 weeks afterwards.
Worth it. Worth it for the foxtail bag.
Cheers.
Love that. Congrats. Well, speaking of growing up, I know you grew up in the States, but you've got ties to Australia within the family that I'd love to kind of hear about.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I do. So my grandfather was born in Australia, and was born in Toowoomba. Have you spent any time in Toowoomba?
I have not. I have not.
I gather at the time it was big, and it still may be. I know kind of like peanut and cotton farming.
Yeah, big farming up sort of in Queensland, so up north.
So he had a real rough childhood, quite brutal. In fact, he was abandoned on a doorstep. We really don't know much
Wow.
about the generations preceding him, but he grew up on the streets. He grew up actually escaping out of orphanages,
Hmm.
and eventually made his way as a stowaway onto a ship to South Africa, where
Okay.
he met
Wow.
my grandmother, and her whole family had died kind of in the flu epidemic, and so they were both orphans. And
Wow.
um, this kind of extraordinary story of their life, where they made it to the U.S. kind of very for a short period that my dad was born, but then he grew up in Mexico City. And my father and his brothers had a very humble upbringing. And, when it was time for high school, he was sent off to this very rough military school that doesn't even exist anymore. And then got a scholarship to go to the Naval Academy here in the US, and transferred then to Harvard and went to Oxford and Stanford Business. And, all on the good fortune of scholarships,
Yeah.
and had this extraordinary career, which led him to banking and being an ambassador for the U.S. and running for office, and then working with the Federal Reserve. And
Incredible.
to be perfectly honest, I've kind of always been in awe of this generational story. And I have an older brother and a sister, and all of us, kind of growing up is like, well, how do we continue on that trajectory? I mean, kind of this, you know, I mean, to literally put a point on it, my father was one of the guys who ran the Federal Reserve in Texas, which or
Mm.
Dallas, the country which is in charge of the monetary policy. So, you from one generation of begging for money to literally printing it.
It's incredible.
And so I think, and I've been to Australia many times, and as a Texan, I feel like Australians and Texans have a lot in common. Look you in the eye. I don't care if you got a fancy last
Mm.
name or not. If you want to contribute, pull up a chair. Tell some jokes, and let's all be on an equal playing field. People don't take themselves terribly seriously, and there's a lot of opportunity. But I tell that story about my grandfather because part of that was a reason I started this podcast that I've been doing with my dad, where he and I together interview, kind of living legends in their own worlds, kind of distinguished people, not just corporate types, but
Mhm.
professional athletes and, artists.
So the podcast is called Coffee with the Greats.
Yep. Coffee with the greats. And it's just that, but it's kind of a long form interview about, hey, what were your parents like when you were growing up? What did they instill in you? Tell us your
Mhm.
journey, with the idea of like, what did you actually learn in your life story that is important that you pass on to your children and grandchildren? So this kind of life wisdom that has nothing to do with current politics and nothing to do with, you know, financial statements of your company at the moment. It's just what really matters when it's all said and done. and what have you learned along the way? And it's been a great journey, kind of like you guys. It was originally just a personal project,
Hmm.
and I recorded a number of these with my dad together over a year. And when the pandemic started, I just thought, hey, we can now. All of those were recorded in person, and now that the world has
Okay.
kind of gone to Zoom meeting, as it were, we could release a bit of what we already have to set the theme, and if it catches on, we can then record these interviews in real time. And so it's been great fun.
Amazing. So you've had guests like the CEO of Mastercard, the chairman of JP Morgan Chase, NFL Hall of Famers. Who else have you got coming up?
We've got we got a great episode coming out soon with the founder of Southwest Airlines, who's
Cool.
a real character. He has actually since passed away.
Oh, okay.
So it's a bit of a special conversation because he's a really extraordinary man, and I've never in my life, I mean, a real old fashioned cowboy. This guy, his name is Herb Kelleher,
Mm.
and he smoked an entire pack of menthol cigarettes during the interview. I mean, the whole, like 30 cigarettes. I've never seen anything
Wow.
like it. And he's got the voice to match. I mean, a real scratchy old cat. It's great. And then we're actually starting to line up some really cool interviews for season 2. I won't give any spoilers, but there's some fun ones, and I'm starting to think on some Aussies actually. We might
Yeah,
reach out to.
well.
When I when I was in college, I one of my buddies, he was like, hey, when you come to Australia with your a cappella singing group, you can just stay at our house. And
Hmm.
I just went to college with him, and he was the only guy I knew in Australia. And so when we were there, stayed at his house. He's the nicest guy. His last name was Turnbull, and I guess both of his parents, Lucy and George, were prime minister. I don't know. I mean, it was just, they were the most lovely
Malcolm, right?
people.
Malcolm. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, we'll
Malcolm Turnbull. So
see.
he was the Prime Minister of Australia for a couple of years ago.
And
A couple of years ago.
she was mayor of Sydney. Is that correct?
Something
Lucy
like that.
Turnbull.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very successful family. He made a killing in the sort of internet boom.
Let me tell you,
The
it
late
was
90s.
the coolest house I've ever seen.
I bet it was. It's amazing. Very cool. Well, you've got more friends in Australia now.
But Australia, and particularly Melbourne, I mean, you guys are kind of the capital of cool coffee culture.
We are, man. I've sort of two cups in, and it's something I want to talk about. Obviously, the podcast is Coffee with the Greats, which we'll link up. But you've got a coffee, a company, a roastery. Tell me about it. Tell me about the different types of coffee you sell. Tell me how you drink your coffee. Let's nerd out on
Yeah.
on
So
beans.
I've just been a coffee nut my whole life, and
Hmm.
I got into acting through making these little videos, and
Hmm.
from those going viral, I started getting cast in stuff, and my heart and soul was really in making these little videos. I loved acting in projects, but you're one of 500 people that come together to make something like that happen. And
Sure.
so I always, to be perfectly honest, Andy, I always thought of myself as like a marketing guy. And
Hmm.
I loved that and have paid a lot of attention to that. And so I continue to have this idea, as the world has changed and as Amazon works and direct to consumer, humans are just loyal to convenience.
Hmm.
And, being somewhat fluent in marketing, I just always thought, look, the brands of the last 100 years were built on shelves, and the brands of tomorrow all have to be built in phones, on the phone screen.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
that's just the way of the world. And so with coffee, the last 15 years, but the last 10 years, coffee's had an explosion worldwide, particularly in retail. I'm sure you've noticed, like, the coffee shops around you have gotten cooler and cooler for all the right reasons. Like, it's really great.
Yep.
But in America, the numbers are roughly 190 million Americans drink coffee every day, and 95% of those people buy their coffee from the grocery store, from the supermarket.
Yep.
And so those are the same brands since World War II, really. And so I thought, okay, what if the simple value proposition for coffee for me has always been freshness. Words like the
Yep.
finest or the best, or, I mean, it's the same thing in the watch world, right? Like, all of those are subjective. It's what people think, and it's different tastes for different people. But you can't
Hmm.
fake freshness. And so if we could kind of create a print on demand, basically we roast and ship the coffee the day you order it, and it lands on your doorstep. And then if we can price that the same as if they just went to a the local market to buy a bag off the shelf, then we might really have a business. And my co-founder Remington
Hmm.
is he's coffee's been in his blood since he was 15 years old, and his uncle had built this roasting facility that serviced just grocery stores, but it was all private label. And so, we thought, hey, what if we could just go kind of direct to consumer? And we started with a Kickstarter, and that was several years ago, and we've grown and grown since. So it's been a lot of fun. Coffee is something. There's nothing snooty about it. We try to be specialty coffee without a specialty attitude, and it's a it's such a personal thing. Again, like watches, like it's such a personal thing to the person who's wearing it. Coffee is really just brown caffeine water, but it's so much
Mm.
more than that. It's your moment of clarity at the beginning of the day. It's a conversation with a friend. It's a ritual of how you make it. It's just something. If you drink coffee, you do it every single day. So it's been fun to not be quote unquote disruptive in the space, but to just focus on really delivering a product. The logistics of being able to ship nationwide for free, as orders are coming in real time. It's been a serious education, but it's been a lot of fun.
Do you ship internationally?
We do ship internationally, but since COVID, there's just a lot of hiccups. I mean, if I were to ship to you, even
Hmm.
expedite it, ship it to you, down under, it may take 2 weeks. And for a company that we're fresh roasted, fresh roasted, fresh roasted, we don't want to offer that to our consumers if it's not within 48 hours of being fresh roasted.
Okay, all right. Well,
But I'll
I'm
ship I'll
still
ship some
gonna.
to you, buddy. I mean, I've got more coffee beans than could sink the Titanic. They're coming your way.
So I'm thinking I'll send you a bag of my favorite Australian beans roasted out of Sydney, and we can do a bit of a bean swap
I'd
program
love
because
that.
I'm curious. I'm curious to try your single origin. How do you drink your coffee?
I got in the habit of just drinking black coffee on movie
Yeah,
sets
good.
because
Yep.
you picture your typical kind of show about Hollywood, and there's always like 10 assistants hovering by, right? That is
Yep.
exactly how it is in real life. And when you're on a movie set, it's just impossibly boring unless you're actually shooting. And so there's constantly, very nice, underpaid people walking around saying, "Can I
Yep.
can I get you a coffee? Can I get?" And gosh, I mean, most of these actors, they throw in these bizarrely complicated orders of this, that, and the other. And so I just got in the habit early on, say, "Hey, black coffee's great," because it's tough to mess up. And you can also really tell the quality of a coffee just by drinking it black. So that's how I enjoy it. But hey, if I were in Melbourne, I mean, I'd definitely be on a flat white safari.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a purist when it comes to coffee. So black coffee only, espresso filter, mocha master, sort of more American style. But I love it. I love it. Probably 4 or 5 cups a day at least.
I'm actually curious with Australia, kind of the home brewing situation, because I think America has a bit of a unique position, um,
Yeah.
where it's because of our history in World War II, which is
Mm.
essentially that coffee was rationed to every single sailor and soldier in World War II. So, like the phrase "cup of Joe," like that's a U.S. Navy term. And
Hmm.
so all of a sudden, you have all of these sailors coming back home after World War II, right around the time of kind of suburban expansion, uh, grocery stores, canned goods, and you had this built-in demand now for coffee. And so stores started selling just the hardware of originally they were percolator machines, and then I'm sure
Hmm.
for my parents they had just a Mr. Coffee drip machine. The next
Yep.
generational big innovation was Keurig pods, and
Yep.
it seems like every generation kind of has their own brewing method. What about in Australia? I mean, when you were young, did your parents brew coffee in the kitchen at home?
It's really interesting that you say because I'm sort of I think some of the more European families that I grew up with did a lot of sort of home brew, especially sort of Italians and Lebanese and Greek, because it was much bigger in European culture. Um, as sort of I think third generation Australian, we didn't really. It was sort of instant coffee my parents didn't drink a lot of coffee, and then maybe the last 20 years that all changed when coffee shops popped up, and then yeah, you're right, over the last 10, 15 years, especially sort of Melbourne, Sydney, the capital cities, the coffee world has gone crazy. Like the worst cup of coffee you'll probably have here is going to be like a 6 out of 10. So
Sure.
there is, at an average, the coffee is really, really good. I think everyone goes through cycles of getting hooked onto coffee, and then I mean, certainly when everyone's working from home, especially now, like most of the country's been out of their office for nearly 6 months.
Right.
So
Right.
home brewing, cafes are open and whatnot, but home brewing has certainly gotten a lot more popular, whether that's sort of an espresso machine or, a V60 filter pour
Sure.
over, cold brew. I like to nerd out on things. So coffee, whiskey, watches, just like you. So I go through phases of like when it's hot, I just drink nothing but cold brew, and you make a toddy.
Yeah.
That's which is an American thing.
The
Yeah,
big new item now is
yeah,
nitro cold brew.
yeah,
And and finding ways to pump nitrogen into it and different ways to do that. What's nice is there's no way you can really go wrong. And the other cool
yeah.
thing about coffee is it's about as global a commodity as it gets,
Mm,
for millennia. And so I love the fact that countries like Ethiopia, just the cultural way that you would make a cup of coffee for, say, a friend who's coming over is so different than in Yemen, which is so different from Latin America, which is like a total different situation from, Australia. And then the fact that like the biggest market in the world, China, they're really not even coffee drinkers. They've been a tea drinking population
mm.
forever. And, good luck, Starbucks opening up 4,000 shops there when so
Yeah,
it
fascinating.
really is fascinating on a global level.
Yeah, well, I hope we can have a coffee in real life at some point in a realistic distant
Cheers.
future, maybe
Yeah.
maybe next year. Cheers to that. Mate, we wrap the show out asking our guests for recommendations on what they've been listening to, watching, reading. So I'd love to hear sort of what else has been keeping you occupied and interested, and if you have any recommendations or exciting new projects you'd like to plug away.
I appreciate that. On the spot a little bit. I'll tell you what I've been watching. Um,
What have you been watching?
I am not I'm not a petrol head. I
Hmm.
appreciate cars, and particularly obviously there's such the Venn diagram of watch lovers and car lovers
Yeah,
overlaps a lot. Um,
there is.
I'm not one of those guys, but I do feel one of my thesis. I don't know. I just feel like car nerds and watch nerds, cars is the same where like you have to appreciate the house's design language over generations.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I so can relate to that, just as it applies to watches. You get somebody going on about just the Porsche's signature body over the last 70 years, and it's like, okay, I totally get that, how it slowly evolves. Um,
Yeah.
all of that is a preface to say there is a new documentary series about Formula One on
Uh-huh.
Netflix that is
Oh yeah.
just riveting. And do you know what I'm talking about? Is it? I mean, now I guess it's a global marketplace. So you guys, I think it's called Need for Speed on Netflix.
Yeah. Yes. Netflix. It might have a different name here. Drive to Survive, is it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the formula. So it's the Formula One kind of docu series. And
Yeah.
let me just lay that if you are not a Formula One or a car person, let me just tell you, you are in for a treat. Because what they've done is
Amazing.
like, let's just rewind a little bit. If you were a documentary maker, like, unless you were a breakout one in a million hit, nobody's going to go to the movie theater to see a documentary. Like, for the last like 15 years,
Mm.
20 years, like, you seldom would go to the actual cinema to see that. Now, of course, it's all streamed in, and it's just this golden era of documentaries where, part of the magic about documentaries, you got to have a good story and good access, but then you also have to allow for just magic to happen while you're shooting. And so this whole entire team has just kind of lived with all the different teams of F1 for over a year. And each
Mhm.
episode is just a different a different team, but invariably that's like a different country. So, you see like Ferrari's team and just the personal drama between Italians who are all like, no, it has to be beautiful. It's so cool. And immediately it's just like the Germans who are like so intense and we must demolish the competition. And then it'll go to like some Brazilian guy. I love it. It has almost nothing to do with cars. It's such human stories, and yet it's these extraordinarily dangerous machines. It's a good watch.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll link that up. I think it's over in Australia. I think it's called Drive to Survive, and there's 2 or 3 seasons out now. So it's really cool to see that format doing well. You've been listening to anything, enjoying anything?
Oh, I listen
reading
to a
anything?
lot. I try to keep Spotify's kind of
Yeah.
playlists because I always keep them public. So if people want to follow them,
Mhm.
we have my company's called Bixby, so we've got a playlist Bixby on Brew. There's
I'll
really
link it up.
good stuff. What I've started to do is I found my old CD binder, compact discs,
Oh,
audio CDs. So I'm
cool.
going analog, I guess. Well, not fully analog, but back to zeros and ones on a disc. And it's amazing, Andy, how like these random CDs from my youth, I know the lyrics to all the songs. Whereas
Yep.
like over the last 10 years, unless it's a banger pop single, like I don't even know the words to any of it. It's just you have these full albums that are played on repeat over, a great road trip when you were young, or maybe like I don't know. I heard a song the other day that I hadn't thought about the first girl I kissed in 20 years, but it brought me right back. And so yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening to a lot of like 1990s like acoustic guitar nonsense.
No, very cool. It's all about keeping it fresh and interesting. A new album came out last week that I've been listening to that I think you actually might like, having listened to some of
Yeah, what is it?
your music. Glass Animals. It's called Dreamland.
Ooh,
I'll send you a link. I'll send you a link in the chat right now. You have a listen afterwards. But it's a really interesting and kind of funky, cool album. I hadn't heard of these guys until it came up on my Spotify playlist,
I like it.
and I've listened to it 3 times since 8 p.m. last night. Like
Really, yeah.
there's influences from like the Strokes to the Beach Boys to Dr. Dre even, and it's the lyrics are weird and ironic and sarcastic and really don't make any sense if you wrote them down, but somehow it just all comes together. It's fantastic. You have to let me know what you think.
I
But
will. I
anyway,
will
I
absolutely.
digress. I digress. So great Netflix recommendation. Grab some old CDs and make lockdown purchases. What's the next? What you're going to buy? What's the next one? That's what we'll wrap on.
I mean, fiscally, it's probably irresponsible, but holy smokes, that new the Omega 321, the Ed White coming out. I mean,
Yeah.
that is just that whole movement on the back. And the
Mm.
whole Lamania story, the fact that it's like 39.7 millimeters, that's really my sweet spot. The bracelet looks incredible. I do think I went to where I went to high school. Um, it was the same high school that one of the 3 astronauts on the original moon mission went to. So it was Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and then the one no one hears
Cool.
about is a guy named Michael Collins. He's the guy who stayed in the shuttle, and
Yeah.
um, I just think it's like the coolest thing in the world. So I can't wait when that comes out. But I reckon it's probably going to be some time before they hit our shores.
Not too sure. Not too sure. Hopefully by the end of the year. But wow, Miles, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It has been an absolute treat to have you on. The topics covered have been incredible. We'll link up Coffee with the Greats. We're going to have to link up your coffee company at Bixby Coffee. Your Instagram is at Miles Fisher. This is just one of those chats. It's been amazing. I think we've talked everything from $50,000 Cartier golfing watches to coffee to entrepreneurship to a cappella groups.
It's just
Just an
the
all rounder.
typical, it's the typical OT podcast, man. That's regular
Yeah, coffee
territory.
with.
But I really do appreciate it. And just just for me, sincerely, Andy, I'm so grateful for what you guys put out. It's really helped me get through the pandemic a bit. Like, I mean that sincerely. Like the only time I really have is when I take my dog out for a walk in the neighborhood, and I put on a mask and I throw in my earphones, and listening to you guys, banter. kind of about the watch world and frankly the watch world adjacent, it's good medicine, man. So I'm grateful to you.
Well, that means a lot. We put a hell of a lot of work into it, and sort of hearing that sort of feedback, and I'll pass on to Felix. It's amazing. So thank you, genuinely. That is lovely to hear.
Cheers, buddy. Take care. Be safe.
All right.
I'm a little sad that I missed that one, but all to you. Well done.
Well, thank you, Felix. And as you heard, Miles is happy to come back on. So you haven't missed out forever. But yeah, what a gent. Make sure you give Miles a follow at Miles Fisher on his socials, and we'll link up his podcast, Coffee with the Greats, as well.
Yep, definitely.
I've listened to 2 episodes, which were both really cool. And it's
Did you subscribe yet?
Yeah, of course,
nice.
of course. 5-star rating for him.
Nice.
I know how it feels. I know how this sort of stuff.
Okay.
How the ratings and reviews are important early on when you're kicking off a new pod.
Speaking of ratings and reviews,
give us some.
5-star.
Yeah, we'll 5-star all the way, baby. As always, thank you to our sponsors. Support us by supporting our sponsors. Thank you to Major Tom Media
Thanks,
for
Major.
putting this. Thanks, MT, for putting this all together. And thank you guys for listening. We've got a whole bunch of fun stuff happening this month. So
hang on. If people want to follow us, ot.podcast.
And they want to email?
Yeah. otthepodcast@gmail.com.
Boom. And
I don't know what
we'll see you guys next time.
Oh, okay. All right. Bye.
We don't have another one yet?
No.
All right. See you guys. Huh?